I attended Reading Pride this year. That was a lot of. We had a stand in this group. You know, for getting people interested. It was the best week cooking so I've ever been to.
Right, ladies and gentlemen, before we start the meeting, I would ask all those here to stand so that we can do a 1 minute silence. Remembrance of Her Majesty. Okay. Thank you very much. So we move into, we're going to do the standard. Good evening and welcome to this meeting of Woodley Towns Council Strategy and Resources Committee, being held on the 27th of September 2022. Woodley Town Council meetings are now recorded, with recordings streamed live and stored on the Town Council's YouTube channel. By virtue of attending the meeting, you consent to having your image and audio recorded for this purpose. If you do not wish for your image and audio to be recorded, then please do not stay for the meeting. For those in attendance, we're not expecting a fire drill tonight, so if you hear the fire alarm, please head to the nearest fire exit and congregate at the fire assembly point by the Oakwood Centre at the front of Woodford Park. Done that. So now moving on to the agenda. Do we have any apologies, please?
Yes, we have 3 apologies from councillors Brindley, Anderson and Lewis.
Thank you. Do we have any declarations of interest from members relating to the business of the meeting? Nope. Item 3, the minutes of the meeting held on the 7th of June 2022. To approve the minutes of the Strategy and Resources Committee held on the 7th of June 2022. And they can be signed by the chairman as a correct record. And just to remind you, the minutes were provided in the full council agenda of the 21st of June 2022. So all those in favour of me actually signing the minutes? Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Next, finance. To budgetary control, we've received the report SR 1822, page 7. So I shall hand over to Kevin to provide the highlights.
Page 7, expenditure. I think probably the main item to point out there under central costs, which is running a little over. There's one particular item in there which was to do with emergency repair, which was actually a replacement boiler unit at Woodford Park Leisure Centre, which had failed, so they were without hot water, and that needed replacing. There's some other items in that heading, which was to do with things like copier income and smaller items, but that's the main thing that's affected that number. Likewise, corporate management is 46, because some of those fees come out at the start of the year, so the HR package and the service for that, and some other fees that come out at the start of the year. Moving on to income.
What's that had to be replaced?
Sorry.
Do you know how old the old boiler was that had to be replaced?
I'm not sure the exact age. It was quite old. It was more than 10 years, I know, but I think it was probably about 13 to 15 years old, but I would need to check. So moving on to income.
Sorry, actually, can I?
Yeah.
Quick question. Under maintenance HQ.
Yeah.
So is that the shed?
It's a bit more than the shed. Yeah, it's the buildings and the art basically, and the ground there.
Oh, right.
So yeah, that's sorry. There is one there that's at sort of 91%.
Yeah.
That's to do with some planned works to do with adapting part of the building, and also the bunds that they built some new storage bunds for materials, loose fill materials in the yard.
Okay, thanks.
Excuse me, can I ask one?
Yeah.
Is it the formatting having the figures?
It is. This is it happens sometimes, but not all the time. Sometimes that it happens with the text and not with the numbers. Here it's done with the numbers. It's shunted some things. So yeah, please ask if some of those aren't clear.
So under corporate management, the actual expenditure is 1,663, not the odd one that's sticking out.
The actual 167,607 for 2021. Is that right? The middle number on that.
No, the middle number.
Oh, you're looking at the one
I'm
underneath.
looking at corporate management halfway up the page on expenditure. There's 1,663.
Yes. Yeah.
Essentially, capital program. It's the capital program line, not the corporate management.
So yeah, income over the page. Again, central cost has got some income that's under 42%. I think that's part of that is the town centre partnership rent comes out there. So that's partly where that's under, and so there's some miscellaneous income, so funny items in there to the copy thing. So that is a little bit under. Letting income is at 56%, so that is the actual hiring and other income. So for the police office and things like that also comes under there, which is at or over 42. So that's why it's a little bit over. So if there's any questions on.
Can I just ask, these fares that come in
Yes.
out here, do they pay us?
Yes,
They do.
they do. Yeah.
I've never noticed it anywhere.
Yeah, you will see that in leisure services.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions? I've got a request, actually. I think the time is probably the next meeting, just to give a status report on all our loans. What they are, where we are, when they're going to.
Yeah.
I think we should do that on a semi-regular basis. So that was to receive the report. The next section is and section payments. Set out appendix will be page 9. So are they? Anne, you got some?
That's on page 9 actually, and next one, page 10. So I'm just thinking, Positive Energy Limited, you paid £2,307 for electricity supply to the Oakwood Centre.
Yeah.
So how does that relate to the electricity you're getting from your solar panels?
Is a very good question, actually. One of the things that we haven't reported back to members is a picture of what that looks like in terms of offset financially and in terms of the climate stuff. So that is something I'm working on to try and show that, because you're right, it doesn't really demonstrate that against that.
No, okay, that's good. But one or two other questions along the same lines, I think.
Yeah, so there's two rates. So the solar panel rate gives a daytime rate, obviously, when it's generating electricity, and then when it's not, there's the other rate anyway. So there are two rates.
Oh yes, the roof repair. Rob Seal Roofing Solutions roof repair. That's on page 10 as well. 23,000. Is that completed? Yes. I've got it. Thank you. That's it for me for page 10.
Yeah, on page 10, the last one for Roxton Limited Landscaping Town Centre Garden. What's that payment? What does that cover? That payment?
Right. So that was the all of the work for the garden. So the soil, the groundwork, and the planting.
I assume that's all.
Does that include the water connection? Because
No,
that's hanging loose.
yeah, the water connection, we're still waiting for Thames Water to come and actually do the connection.
Right.
We've done our bit, which was to put the pipe, the standpipe in and have it all ready with the pipe there. And they've just taken forever to come and actually connect. They'll be coming down from the side of Iceland there to actually collect it up.
How long have you been waiting there, Kevin, for that?
Several months now, but they're still chasing it.
It's probably their approach to saving water. So if they don't connect it, we're not using it.
true.
Sorry, it's my cynical view.
And we'll probably be all right now till June next year.
Any other questions on any of these sections?
Just a silly question. I assume that these payments, are they all inclusive of VAT or is VAT on top?
That's without VAT.
That VAT.
Okay, so I have a few more. So.
Yeah, keep going on.
Okay, well, just the epoxy resin, there's been a couple of purchases. Glass cast epoxy resin, where does that go?
We used some for the setting of the Jubilee stones around the tree. We used some for something else, but I can't think what it is.
Right, okay. Oh, yes. And on page 12, electricity as kind of gas seems the gas being used seems to be very low in all the sites, like Oakwood Centre, £397. I think that's June. That's lower than the other months. You know why? Yeah, that's a lot lower.
They should all be on readings. Obviously, we don't use much gas through the summer months
No.
generally because that is heating, except for a small amount used in the cafe for
Right.
the cooker.
Oh, so
It was hot water actually.
perhaps the May charge, has some carryover from the winter or something.
Possibly.
Because there's quite a big difference. Yeah, it comes very well after that. Okay, so the Hamlin Watermain standpipe, presumably that went in the woody shops in the garden area.
Yeah.
Haven't finished. On page 15, where did the Rockfon Pacific ceiling tiles go?
Woodford Park Leisure Centre. We've replaced all the ceiling tiles through the function room while it was closed for the electrical works.
Oh, right. Oh, okay. Okay. And is the electrical work done in the leisure centre now?
Very close to being complete, yeah.
Right, right, okay. Did you have a fire alarm go off? You've got call out on page 16, RES Systems Limited, call out to the fire alarm at Woodford Park Leisure Centre.
I think that was to do with, it wasn't an alarm activation. There was, where we disconnected all the electrics, there was an issue with it then not being connected. So as there was basically no fire alarm at one point, so we needed to call them out to make sure that was rectified so we could operate the building and have the fire.
All right, okay then. On page 18, the Churchill Contract Services Limited, I think the entries are duplicated. Same one twice.
Yeah, I'd have to check. That is the monthly figure for the Park Leisure Centre cleaning, so I have to check whether that's one that's straggled over from the previous month. Or...
no, I think because it appears every month. Churchill Services appears every month. So I think perhaps it has missed from July. Yeah, perhaps it has. Oh, that's
slipped through from July.
Yeah.
Either due to a late invoice.
A late what, sorry?
A late invoice.
Oh, right. Oh, really? Oh, right, okay. On page 18 again, Global 4 Communications, the price for phones and mobiles was £3,405 on that on that occasion. That's a lot more than usual.
Yeah,
Why?
there was a backdated or uninvoiced amount for the rental on the internet phone system that we've got in here. So they've not charged an amount, which they very kindly charged and stuck on one big invoice.
So this is such a class. Okay. I think that's it. Thank you.
Any other questions? I've just got one for you, Kevin. Go back to page 10, the landscaping town centre garden. Does that include our public also about the pavilions being planted?
Yep, they're in.
So they're in?
Yep,
Oh, great.
they're in. I'll double check. I know we've had them, so I'll make sure they're
Okay.
The IMs.
I just wanted to know whether there'll be another bill, but not.
no.
There's one item here, it says asbestos sample test. I mean, what was that? It's bottom of page 18.
Yeah, there was that was to do with some materials found in the allotments, which a tenant had come across. There's probably some other bits lying around historically. We cleared a lot of it over
So was it positive or negative?
It was negative. It was not asbestos containing at all. So
Just say Carol. as well.
Not me, not guilty.
Okay, there's no other questions. We need to vote to accept these. All those in favour, please show. That's unanimous. Item C, the PSDF fund. Like to make a brief comment?
yeah, so that's the first time you'll have seen that. That's just to note following the previous decision to invest the council's money in the public sector deposit fund through the CCMA. We thought we would report that at each meeting of SNR, just so members can see what those balances are. What you're looking at there in those two boxes, the one that's called Invest One, that's the 2 million that was cashed in from the investment portfolio. What you can see there in the increase, it's made that 4,200 interest since it went in, so that period. July.
Where did you find an account that pays interest?
Through the CCLA, there's not many of them about. And the Public Works Loan Board figure there, and also just to note underneath there the 600,000, which has recently been deposited, which was the sort of second half of the precept of the Woking Borough Council. So what you'll see going forwards is just that balance each time.
Any questions at all?
Is that fixed rate of interest, Kevin?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Works both ways, doesn't it? So that's just to note both items. We'll now move on to item D, external auditor appointment. Kevin?
Yeah, thank you. So there is a recommendation here. Basically, the council needs to decide whether it wishes to stay within the SAA regime for appointment of external auditors. So this committee needs to make a recommendation to full council as to whether it wishes to do that. The advice within the sector is very, very strongly stay within the regime. There's absolutely no benefit whatsoever in leaving it. The things you would have to do as a council to comply with the regulations if you came outside of it are huge. And that system is already set up there for very good reason. There have been no councils across the country have opted out of that in the last 5 years. They're given the option to do so. So the recommendation is very much to stay within that regime. There is some more information about that on page 21, which details that a bit more. I think probably the key bit there in terms of painting the picture, I think it's towards the end where it says opting out, and those bullet points about what the council would need to do if it wanted to opt out are pretty onerous and I would say pretty risky. Particularly, you need to develop your own specification for how external audits carried out. Yeah, it sounds like a disaster. I can't imagine anyone doing that, but it does need a recommendation to full council
So any questions on
Well,
that? Can I take
I was going to propose a recommendation, but if there's a question,
There's a question or?
yeah, I mean, you know, I entirely agree with you, Kieran. I was just going to ask, do you know what an appropriate independent auditor panel is?
All right.
yeah.
Thank you. A lot of this is gobbledygook, because I'm sure. Does this mean that we have to accept the auditors that they give us?
Yes, that's the external auditor. So that's how that system has always been set up. So, and the reason for that is the regulations that the external auditor works to are established and are the same across all councils.
Right.
But there is an option.
What's this auditor's job? I mean, I'm sorry, I know I'm like,
Yeah, no,
I don't understand these things.
So the external auditor reviews the annual governance and accountability return, what we call the AGAR, which is the council's accounts.
Right.
The processes that back that up.
Right, he's the guy that signs those documents that we all say, yes, we agree.
Yeah,
to.
so but that's the external audit. So we have internal audit to help us through that and prepare those documents and get it to the audit.
Right,
Yeah.
okay. So that they check our accounts and they check that we're doing the things according to the way we're supposed to do them.
Yeah.
And they're appointed by another body to
Yes.
us.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. That's really important. Thank you.
Any other questions? Otherwise, I know Carol's.
Just propose that we recommend to full council that we continue with the SAA sector-led auditor appointment.
I'll second that. All those in favour, please show. Unanimous. Thank you very much.
You sold it, Kevin.
You know, on the basis that it's far too more difficult to do anything else. Yes. Item 5 on page 3A, bookings and room hire. On appendix 5A, page 23. Kevin?
Thank you. So we changed the format of a couple of meetings back to provide this in a graphical form instead of the table with lots of numbers in, which hopefully is a bit more helpful. But I've noticed there's some dollar signs have snuck into the room hire one, which should be
It was on that one,
No, the biggest, yeah.
I get more of that.
So just to note what those numbers are there, and income for room hire and also for catering are above the targeted budget at this point of the year. I'm expecting the catering one to look pretty good next time we look at it as well. I've had quite a busy period through the summer with the park being really busy, the play area and some events, so that'll look pretty good as well.
And you're entirely satisfied that it's not reporting a conversion to dollars? Because it rather reads that way. When
Yeah,
you look at it.
I think the number is correct. It's the formatting that should just be a constant.
Can I ask you to reissue that page?
Yeah.
Just so everybody's got a record. Obviously, if your agenda goes up, also, the website needs to be modified as well. Any other questions on it?
No, I'd like to comment just to say that it's good to see the income holding up from both catering and room hire.
The only thing I would ask, next time round, could we have a line for pre-COVID? I guess it's 1920. Just as we're comparing it to COVID, and it'd be nice to have that base one.
Yep.
Right, so that was to note. We'll look at the catering income now, page 24, appendix 5B.
Actually, that needs obviously reissue as well because it hasn't got the actual figure on it either. Sorry, so that's
But we can see the direction of.
yeah. So that line is correct, but the obviously needs to figure properly.
Any questions? I think Beth is right. It's good to see a recovery.
Stupid question. Is this the revenue from sort of catering from events, or does it include the revenue from the crown bag?
So it's the catering concession amount. So the 10% rate of gross turnover, net turnover. Sorry.
Brown bag.
So it is from everything. So yes, it's the business catering and events.
I'll carry it, yes.
And the shop.
Can I shut that door, please?
Yes, I was going to ask if that
Probably-
was actually interfering.
It's like a famous
It
saying.
sounds like they're having more fun than us, yes.
Oh. I don't know what the play is they're doing. Oh, teachers.
So I'm coming tomorrow.
It's all about a whiskey distillery, isn't it? Right, so we then move on to item 6, the standing orders of financial regulations subcommittee. We'll consider the following recommendations, which are here somewhere. I'd like just to give a quick preamble. It was the first meeting of the standing orders of financial regulations subcommittee. And it was the first time we'd ever had such a subcommittee, which is a conduit for suggestions and corrections on the standing orders. So I was very pleased for it to be set up like that. I'll use this forum to, advise you if you think there's something there that's wrong or incorrect or could be improved, please. I think you put a template in here.
I think it is, yeah.
There's a template in here for you to submit to Matthew, and then that will be fed into the subcommittee. We've got another meeting on the subcommittee the day after full council, and at the moment we've got nothing to discuss. So obviously it won't be held if there's nothing to discuss. But that's the conduct. So I can urge everybody to do that. So it's quite an extensive amount of stuff that was went through the committee. Trying to find the page. I've got it. There you go. It starts at page 25. I've made a few notes. Hopefully we won't need to go through it line by line. I can say that all the recommendations or the suggested changes that the committee reviewed were, most of them were really drilled down and questions asked. Things were modified accordingly, I must admit. Not that much was modified, and it was a unanimous decision of all members of that subcommittee to approve what you've got in here at the moment. Now, the biggest issue or the biggest resolution is the change number 1, which is to do with recommendations from officers, subcommittees and task and finishing working groups. Prior to this suggested change, it was all interweaved under motions without notice. And everybody, including myself, and I'm pretty good at understanding constitutions, constantly got confused about what's doing what can we do in this motion without notice, etc. So the suggestion was to remove the recommendations from the section that was labelled the motions without notice, and actually create a complete separate section which was specifically for recommendations. This would add significant clarity about what the process was when you're dealing with recommendations. And it furthermore, it set up a simple sort of loop that all chairs of committees could follow, and it's really a 4-point loop. So whoever is making a recommendation introduces the report or recommendations, as we do now. 99 times out of 100 it's Kevin introducing the report and the recommendations at the bottom. Then the chairman will ask anyone who wants to make a question, their hands up who wants to do a question, similar to what happens in borough. And the chairman, one of these guys, will be making a list. The chairman then goes down that list one at a time for the question. Only one question per person at a time. No supplementaries. When the list is exhausted, go back again. So that gives everybody the opportunity to at least ask one question rather than what's happened in the past with certain councillors. Nobody here, by the way, but certain councillors who will ask 7 or 8 or 9 questions in a row, and there are people who aren't as forceful, don't get that chance. So you continue that loop until all the questions are asked. Then we move on to statements. So any councillors then can make a statement expressing their views on the recommendation. Not a debate, but they can make a statement saying, you know, I totally agree with this, or I disagree with this, or whatever. The questions are to do with clarity of the report. And then when all the statements are made, we move to the vote. So I think it's quite a structured way. It's effectively what happens as, I think, Carol, you've been on the borough, haven't you? Well, district, so, but, you know, it's the way that works, and I think it works very, very well. There are 3 proposals associated with the section of recommendation that's cross-referencing. There are 11, oh no, so that's number 3. Item 11 is something that Matthew brought up, material changes. It's one of those just tidying up. But if something is not a material change, maybe a typo, correction, or a simple clarity, we would have to go through the whole process and ultimately wait until the full council to do that. And that doesn't, it's not a good, effective way. So item 11 in this list does that.
Oh, when can I ask a question?
Yeah.
About item 11, I just wondered how would the changes be advertised to the councillors, those sorts of changes?
If the standing orders are updated, then new versions of the standing orders will be sent round. Ultimately, we're looking, when this settles down a little bit, we want to get to a point where we can have hard copies that you'll note in the new version has dates on the top of the pages and when they're updated. And the hope is that we will be able to actually, assuming there aren't too many page changes and we have some gaps and things, we would only send out the changes, the pages that have changes, so we can say there's a slight change in there. We're hoping not that there'll be massive things that are added. But you get a change when that happens. So everyone will be told when those changes happen. Obviously, if it is a minor typo, then it may be that the next time that they're fully reissued, you'll be notified because it might be insignificant enough that it'll be picked up at the next point. But if it was something like a statutory change that meant that we just had to update the wording here to match it, then that would just be able to be done and then be sent out to everybody.
All right, okay.
And in fact, you know, it's now been structured that you could, I've just been talking to Matthew, initially give everybody a copy like this, and you can put in line the separators, because the way it's designed now, it's got like a blank page to make sure you don't have a spin over. Then people will get this, and then anytime anything changes, you just get the pages to change. It's pinching what Borough does, you know, which works well. So that's 11. Change 16. This is one we got caught up. Martin, you were caught up in this one, which was change members nominated to committees. At the moment, we can only do that at full council, which again is not an effective way of using. So change number 16 is addressing that issue to allow it to what we did. I think, was it SNL, Martin? The one
that got me on this?
Yeah, it was, wasn't
Yeah,
it?
one of your blokes, he just said,
Yeah, Robert.
he made a proposal.
Yeah, he suspended standing orders. Well,
Yeah.
you have to do that. So that's that one. And number 23, I took all this was a full council voted to hold all meetings of subcommittees and task and finished working groups virtually. So we voted to do that, and it was just bringing now the paperwork lined up with that. So having gone through that, If there are any questions on any of them, either Matthew or I will try and address them. Al?
Yes, thank you. Page 29, at the top, there's several sentences that have been deleted. Items 6 and 7 aren't repeated, whereas all the others are a bit further down under 15.8. And I wondered why those in particular have been removed. So that's to receive reports, etc.
They were moved into, they were moved into a recommendations. There's a different section, isn't it? But
No, they've been moved into proposals. So we split. So again, recommendations have come out into a complete section.
Right.
And then the motions without notice are split into
So
two.
those appear somewhere else. I just didn't.
Yes, yeah, the red is the new, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. So now in that section,
Yes.
section 15, you've got a section that talks about proposals,
Yes.
and you've got a section that talks about everything else. And the anticipation is, and this sets it down a bit, that the proposals will also get pulled out into a separate section themselves. So anybody who's going through the planning orders, and it's what do I do about proposals, you can go to a section rather than have to go through section 15
Yes.
or whatever.
Okay. Then page 31, under the second block down says to consider that requirement of amendment to be submitted. But I don't think the new standing order addresses that. It should only.
Is this number 6? Is it issue 6?
Issue 6, yes. Whether the requirement for an amendment to be submitted to the town council actually only relate to motions requiring written notice. And that isn't sort of detailed in recommended change. Whether that needs to be made clear, I'm not sure. And then I'm a bit concerned about the blue and red bit under recommended changes, that it actually could stifle debate, because a lot of amendments will arise out of the debate. I don't think anybody sort of, there's a few times when you arrive and know that you're going to propose an amendment, but sometimes different ideas come out and then somebody will propose an amendment, and this would not allow them to do that. I think that's probably not the way to go.
So we are talking here about motions under notice,
Yes.
right? The potential issue with what you're suggesting and what we had already was it puts other councillors at a disadvantage. Your group, for instance, could put an amendment forward, and you potentially wouldn't know about it, and so it would be called. So that's the issue.
Yeah, I understand
Now that can be addressed by the amendment going. Correct me if I'm wrong. This is the guru. 5 minutes before we actually
Yeah,
do the debate.
what I'm getting at is that you have a motion put forward, it's proposed, it's seconded, there might be an amendment that somebody's come up with already, and we know about that, and that gets debated. But in the debate, sometimes, and it has happened, we've said, okay, that motion, don't like this bit, but we like that bit. And we've actually all agreed sometimes on an amended motion. But if you can't amend it during the debate, which this isn't allowing, then that wouldn't happen.
I can see where you're coming at, but I think it'd be too difficult to manage.
Well, it happens at the moment.
We've done it, we have done that.
I know, but we've had lots of confusion, and that's happened. Who's amended? Have we amended it that way? Who's doing?
But that's actually covered a bit further on by saying that any amendments or changes need to be in writing to the meeting. So if we came up with an idea A, then the meeting would stop, it would get written out, passed round, and then debated.
But this is all coming under, just to say, this is all coming under section 16.6, which is amendments to motions. I'm just talking this out loud to see if I can help myself understand it. And under amendments to motions, amendments must be submitted at any time prior to the commencement of the debate. It would be presumably in relation to the amendment that's been proposed. that is under debate, not the original motion, or
But it
once
doesn't,
that's been
like,
voted
no,
on.
I know where
it's
Carol's coming from. What she's talking about is, during the debate,
Yeah.
there might be an opportunity to say, I want to make an amendment.
And it's quite nice where we all do come together and agree that somebody's motion is okay, but this would actually be acceptable to everybody.
I'm not, can I suggest we don't pass that one and take it back
That's
to
fine by
the,
me, yeah.
looking for a night off. Again, the issue, another issue would be if you're in where typically where it says you will know, both of you, and of the borough, is you have your substantive motion, or you have your original motion, and then someone has an amendment, and then you debate the amendment, and then somebody might have another amendment, and you debate that amendment until you've done that, and then you get back to either the original, because none of the amendments went through, or the amended motion, which is now the substantive motion. Now, I'm not sure how you could do that, because you would almost have to stop the debate, say, hang on a minute, I've got an amendment, and you're halfway through the debate. So let's talk that
I
through.
think it does need talking through, yes.
Because I don't think that was the
understand
intention, it
sentiments.
wasn't the intention of it to
No.
stop people. I think there was meant to be a process
No.
behind it, so
I
that
think it's.
when an amendment came in, that was considered,
Yeah.
or in order if there was
I think
several,
it's a
and then the
side
next one,
effect.
and then the next one.
Yeah.
But I think for me, it just sounds, whenever I read this, it's overly bureaucratic when you have what we've had and people make reasonable suggestions and we can
Yes.
jump to that. So maybe we need to have a look at that.
I think just making sure that debate and compromise can happen. Also on that page 31, just before number 8, it talks about any person's proposed amendment must have been circulated to all councillors in attendance at the meeting. And it says in the a bit about the attendance, and I've got here, what about hybrid meeting attendees and what about the public? So there's this focus on people attending the meeting, are the only ones that are being considered, if you like. So I just like
generally because they're the ones who can vote.
But I think in terms of information, that I think it just must have been circulated to all councillors would be sufficient. They know if they're not in attendance, they can't vote anyway.
I think the problem we've had in the past is that we haven't written down any, well, since I've been here, we tended to just verbally say what they are.
Yes.
And the idea of this is to get it written down. If councillors aren't there, and it just says all councillors, some councillors on holiday, that debate would have to stop until you've got that written. If you, to the letter of what it says,
Yes.
if you must send that to all councillors, you would have to make sure you sent to all councillors, which wouldn't be the point. It would be the people who are in the room who are voting need to be clear on what the wording is that they're voting on. That was the point of that. Otherwise, you just have to stop and bring it back to the next meeting.
Okay, I understand that, yeah.
How we handle that at the borough is you have your amendment prepared and printed, and it's handed out at the time it comes up
To those in
to
attendance.
those in attendance. Yes.
And the borough doesn't allow an amendment on the fly.
No.
No. But this one here, I think is right, because if a person is not in attendance and they can't vote, I would suggest they shouldn't necessarily have the right to do an amendment. It's the people who are going to be voting.
It's information I'm really referring to. So members of the public can't vote, but we still give them the information. So I'm just keen that that information is circulated, not just to those people who are going
There'd be no reason if we're printing it out for councillors that we can do extra copies for members of the public and we can add that in there.
But I'm thinking ahead.
Yes.
On the item 6, if you're allowing amendments on the fly, then are you going to allow people who are on the hybrid, to do amendments on the fly? And then then we have to wait 10 minutes for.
Yeah. No, I don't think
So-
it would.
So
If we have a look at that, maybe that could be considered then.
okay,
Look at that
so-
other one that I brought up.
Could we have a look at the borough standing orders, how that covers that, see if that's any help?
Any others, Karen?
Yeah, Martin has his hand.
Yeah, no, hang on, Anne first, please. Then Martin.
So item 5, well, I suppose I'm probably a bit confused about. it in the sense that is the idea that you would have to announce before the speech in favour of the motion that you were against it?
The issue 5 was that we had 2 standing orders that basically contradicted each other. So in the previous version, which I think was carried over from the old version, it stated that after a motion had been proposed and seconded, the chairman would then ask someone if they wish to speak against the motion, whereas the next one said after the proposer had made their speech. It was a different process. It was really to say which process was appropriate.
It's not an issue so much, but if the motion's there and no one's going to speak against it or even amend it, then why waste the time? You can go straight to the vote because it's got universal acceptance. And again, that's what they do in, as you know, in borough.
I suppose I'm just thinking, supposing someone decides, having heard the speech, that they're then against it, would they?
But I think we went for them before, didn't we?
Yes, we did go for it before.
So it's before anyone's spoken. So if you've got a no-brainer,
Yes.
you already know who the proposer is, and then you ask who's seconded it. You don't then ask the proposer to speak. You ask, is there anybody against it?
Oh,
You tried to do that to me in a council meeting, I think it was the last council, the one before, where I put forward a motion and you said there's no point because we're going to vote for this anyway. I think it was for televising this stuff. My motion was for the recording of meetings. And I didn't want to talk in my speech about recording the meetings particularly. I wanted to talk about why I wanted
But we
the
did
recording.
debate your motion.
Well, you did, but when people put a motion, or put forward a motion, they want something to happen or change or something to occur, but they want to make it clear to everybody else and the public why they want to make that change.
Well, I'm saying that I think the phrase of that is called grandstanding. If everybody's in agreement for whatever's proposed in the motion, which is usually an action, right? You see if you know you end up with everybody can make a speech. This is
But the whole point of a motion is you make a speech.
No, the whole point of the motion. The whole point of a motion is to get some action to happen. That's what we all want.
Yeah.
Right? You didn't submit the motion because you wanted to have publicity about your speech. You submitted your motion because there was something that was wrong that you needed corrected. Everybody agreed with that and it was corrected. So,
but what you're suggesting here is somebody puts a motion forward, you're circumventing the need for them to make a speech.
they don't
the way
need
I
to if
understand it.
everybody agrees. That's the point I'm making. If everybody agrees, why waste the time? No, that individual councillor, if they want to make sure that the general public knew what they were going to say, they issue a press release. You contact the journalists.
Don't be about going to the press.
All right, well, we all know about you going to press. So can we move on, please?
Well, I'm still sort of not completely certain about this because I just feel that there might be people present who would like to have amplification about the motion, and it sounds as if they might not get.
Well, that's easy. No, if they have amplification or clarity of a motion, then they're in a position they can't speak for it. So they indicate they're going to speak against it as the motion stands.
Right.
And then that then triggers a debate.
Yeah.
Anyone, same with borough, anyone can actually say, I want to speak against it, and then make it for it. Okay? If they've got, they can use that mechanism. It happens in borough, etc. So
I think I don't know. It seems a little unnatural to me at the town level. Anyway, that's that. But I did have another question. Yes, I got a bit confused about item 13. It's about standing orders, financial regulations subcommittee. It states that the proposed changes to standing orders should be made via a special motion. Who makes that special motion?
A special motion is where councillors, 5 signatories need to put forward that motion. So,
And that's existing.
Yeah.
That's not new, that's existing. If it's in blue, it's currently existing and almost certainly would have been brought forward from the previous standing order.
Right, so. Okay, so
in the current version, it suggests that any proposed changes have to be made via a special motion. It just was cited, it didn't state that this committee, following a recommendation from the subcommittee, could put forward the proposal, which is obviously a nonsense. So that was why that was updated.
and is it totally clear that in all cases any changes to the standing orders are not decided by the standing orders financial regulations subcommittee, they're decided by strategy and resources?
Yes,
except for the ones that-
it's the standard hierarchy. Any subcommittee or task and finish working group report to the parent group. They make recommendations to the parent group. The parent group, in this particular case, decides, as we've been doing now, whether some needs to be referred back, whether some is not acceptable, or what's acceptable. And then the SNR, with this committee, then make a recommendation to full council. So there's quite an extensive hierarchy. It gives everybody quite a few chances of talking about things.
I suppose it's probably just because it's out of context. I got a bit confused really. Okay, I think that's about it.
I'll continue with my list, so they
Yes.
got interrupted. On page 36, under just above number 17, it says any council removed from a committee in this way will not be able to be reappointed to that committee again until the next municipal year. Why?
It's a very simple one. I'm not saying you or any of your colleagues would do this, but what we're trying to do is future-proof here. What could happen is if you, for instance, are going to be short in the numbers in the committee and you want to get something through, all you do is, well, I'm actually changing it and I'm going to put Fred and Joe on there to make sure you get it through. And then sometime later, you take Fred and Joe because the original 2 were not available. You take those 2 and put it back. It's simple as that.
From an officer's point of view, it's to stop there being chopping and changing based on availability, i.e. someone's ill, so you replace someone on that committee, someone's on holiday, you replace it on that committee. It's meant to be when you want to change.
I guess that was the case. I
There
can
is-
imagine it happening,
yeah.
but I think it actually, I mean, if on May the 8th or 9th, after the first meeting, after the first annual meeting, then and you've got your sort of people on, and then next month you say, oh, so-and-so doesn't want to be on that one anymore because they've got work commitments in the States, whatever. And then that changes, but they do want to go back on SNR because they're the best person to go back on. This precludes that.
You could suspend the standing order.
Okay.
So there is the ability to do that in the extreme. This is meant to be there as kind of a measure to say the purpose is not to allow people to chop and change left, right, and centre. There was a real reason you could put forward a proposal to suspend that standing order, citing the genuine reasons why you might want someone who was on it in the early part of the year. For example, if someone was given a 6-month leave of absence and then was coming back, you might want to do that, and then it would be up to
But
council.
we're trying to avoid suspending standing orders. Is this
But
one
the
of
other
those-
option you would have is if that individual, as you said, maybe they've got a contract in the States, they know when they're coming back. We only have these meetings of the spending committees once a quarter. So you just leave that empty for that period. And they would continue since they come back.
Yeah. It's just until the next municipal year, which could be 10 months, couldn't it?
But it could be 1 month.
Yes. But is it something that could be looked at again in view of that concern?
I don't think it will change, but we can, in the interest.
I just think it just needs an addition in there. I don't know what.
I mean, I think you could add some specific scenarios which would allow someone to be reappointed, i.e. after a leave of absence or something like that. But what we wouldn't want to do is leave it so open that it could be abused in the way that because we wouldn't be able to keep up, I don't think, as officers with in planning,
No,
for
I
example.
understand that. I
So it
appreciate,
has to be-
yeah.
we were trying to make it a genuine change.
Yes.
Just think of, an even worse scenario. You got somebody who does contract work and they're every other month, they're somewhere out of the country. And you'd be changing it every other month. So it's to try and make it not too easy to do.
Yes.
And therefore people have to be committed to do the role.
Yeah.
Now, if somebody knows they're going to be away for 6 months, then usually that doesn't happen overnight. They will have known that for some time in advance, and maybe they should not have taken on. But we'll have a look at
Yeah,
it.
it may be that we talk about consecutive meetings, that it's changed one meeting, then change, and then whatever. So if it could be looked at, that would be helpful. On that one, it talks about 3 clear days, and that's mentioned on page 37 about clear days. Are we talking about working days? Or
Clear days are
whether
actually
those
defined.
days?
They're defined clearly in here.
They're defined in there, and it's the Local Government Act of 1972 that defines what a clear
So
day
we
is.
have to use that terminology.
3 clear days, which don't include Sundays, bank holidays, days of public mourning, which is why this meeting was put back.
So it's working days.
No, Saturdays count.
Okay. I just think if
It's in there. The definition is in.
If it's in
Is in.
right.
Yeah.
Rightio, page 38, it talks about noting the minutes, so rather than for approval. So does that mean that we don't have to go through this business of proposing and seconding and voting on it? We are just noting it. Good. Thank you very much. Hooray. And page 30, 38, page 41. Right at the bottom, it talks about councillors participating virtually. I'm not permitted to vote on nor propose or second any recommendation or motion.
This is linked back to our previous
And I
conversation.
think that's been answered because I thought, why not, as long as they don't vote, but we've discussed that, I think. And then, sorry, a bit further up under amend SO 4.2.1b, it talks, the last bit of red, for meetings of subcommittees, working parties and partnerships, virtual participation will be considered. That contradicts what's already been agreed, that it has been considered and we're doing it. So I think that will be.
Can you tidy that up?
I can have a look at, the idea is that obviously we have to have quorum for virtual meetings. So we have to have that element in, otherwise you could have a subcommittee meeting where one person turns up.
But we've decided that all subcommittees, working parties and partnerships, etc.
It's that will be considered
will
as
be
the
virtual.
yes.
Already, we've decided that. That's what the council decided.
Yes, so I think the point of this is to say, for a meeting to be quorate.
Yeah, it's not that part, Matt, sorry,
Oh,
it's
sorry.
the last sentence.
Yeah, the last sentence.
Where it
on that
says
4.2.
meetings, participation will be considered. Whereas at the top of the page, we've already agreed.
Okay, I'm with you.
Yeah.
The contradiction is, the first part says that if you're part, that's okay, because full council and standing committee meetings, if you participate virtually, you're not considered as present. We all know that. For meetings of subcommittees, working parties and partnerships, we've already decided, full council decided that all those will be virtual anyway.
I think that's it as present at the end of it.
Yes, so it's not, it's for those, it's
The virtual
this
participation
quorum.
is, yeah.
The aim of this sentence is to say that we are considering quorum based on the numbers that are attending virtually for those meetings that are held virtually.
That needs to be tightened up a bit.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't see it as that anything to do with being quorate at the last sentence.
I think, okay, it's because it's under the point that says for a meeting to be quorate, the requirements of standing orders shall
Yes.
apply. For fellow council and standing committees, that councillors virtually at the meeting will not be considered as present for this purpose. The meetings of subcommittees will be considered. I couldn't say will be considered for this purpose.
I
think
It's all under that quorum.
Yeah,
You know what we're saying.
and that here endeth my,
So are you okay for that not to go back to the
Yes.
stand on that one? Any other questions? It's my.
Are these standing orders in place now?
These are modifications apart from the recommendation. They're modifications of existing standing orders.
Sorry, when you become a councillor, you're given a pad that says, these are the standing orders by which we ask you to comply.
Yeah.
Are these in a document that you can give to a new councillor and say, this is what you have to adhere to?
Ones that were approved in, I think it was February.
Without these, what I'm getting
without
at, this
these
whole thing seems to me to be in a state of flux. It seems like a big blancmange wobbling all over the place. And personally, if you ask me to comply with this, there's no chance in hell. I couldn't, because I don't understand what's being said.
So what will happen, once this is approved by full council, these changes, okay, then what you'll get, this is the way it's meant to work anyway. I can find one, but I can't find the page now. Yeah, here we go. So what would happen is, you see here, it says, you probably can't, it says page updated 14/7/22, all right?
Yeah.
So these changes here, if it was impacting that page, they would be modified, and the change would be highlighted in red.
So
And then this would be reissued, this new page would be issued to you, and you would slot it in throughout the other ones and put in a new one.
right, so you've got change control applying to these standing orders. Therefore, there are revisions or revision numbers, and I sign up to standing order, blah, 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 revision 27, and anything that comes later than that, do I get to say yes or no as a councillor?
Full council.
So that this stuff gets, oh, that'd be fun. Because frankly, this is like changing the English tax law, you know? I mean, Stroud don't have any standing orders as a council. No standing orders, just gentlemen's agreement on how they are.
Well, that's illegal, but never mind.
Well, it's not, no,
Okay,
no.
all right, let's not go there, it's a red herring.
Well, shut me up if you like, but
No.
it is not illegal. Standing orders are not required by law. Okay, and you know, I haven't seen what I'm meant to abide by as yet. I don't know which revision.
All of the councillors at full council approved it earlier in the year in the February meeting. I think you were in attendance at that, and
I was, and I didn't agree.
Circulated the full standing orders, the final version as was approved straight after the meeting to all council via email. It's about how to. And
Could you tell me which revision we are currently working on?
About version 3.
Version 3, it's called. Is it?
The document that would have been sent out to the borough has standing orders.
What we need to do is get every councillor aware of what's happening here, because I'm not fully aware. I know that we agreed in principle to abide by the standing orders that were in this sort of state when I saw them. They were full of blue and red and all sorts of things and lines straight through them. We need this, you know, because basically you get told off, you're a naughty boy and all this nonsense if you don't comply with all this stuff. And I don't understand half of it. It's a complete change to what I signed up to in the first place.
the clean copy went out after that February meeting.
And there is, again, a version control sheet.
Yeah, well,
Goes out.
let's get everybody up to date with where they are, because
We will do.
this is a load of changes, isn't it? I don't understand why we're still changing.
This will go through full council.
Yeah. And the net result of that will
It's an
be,
never-ending.
There were requests made. I remember there were requests made by councillors at the full council meeting that suggested this wasn't what went out in February wasn't good enough and needed further.
I thought that's what we agreed to. Yes, it wasn't good enough for sign up to.
Some councillors made that, and it's minuted as such. Full council approved that version, but then said the standing orders and financial regulations could subcommittee would go away, review it, and it would come via this process.
It will be a living document because there's going to be things that are wrong, that need correcting, that will have to go through the process. And there is 3 levels of review. First of all, the committee, then here, and then full council.
Yeah, I just think it's an onerous task for councillors that are volunteers to be going through this. I mean, I'm pretty sure in the borough, they have people that are employed to do all of this changing.
The councillors don't have anything to it. They still have to be aware. And if you think this is big, the borough one is 3, 4, 5 times bigger, and councillors there are expected to know. But you're making a valid point. It's very difficult for councillors to absorb all this stuff, whether you're an old folk like me or a young person like Beth.
So I was just thinking, so today, at this moment, are you proposing that we accept everything that's in a box marked recommended SO changes, whatever colour it is?
With the exception of the couple that Carol has asked us to relook at.
So
what will happen is that will be a recommendation for council.
right,
There's 2, just to clarify, there's 2 recommendations
Oh, yes,
that were made by
We haven't got to the second.
the actual recommendation. So there were 2. One was that the revised standing orders in this version, which contained those changes already updated, were approved and then presented to full council for adoption. But obviously there's some questions over those. And then the second point was the financial regulations, which was
Which we haven't got to yet, but that's a much simpler thing. And then remember, you've got a committee chairman here, but if you're not quite sure how to do something, and you want to be squeaky clean, ask. You know, the whole review that started some time ago was to make it more structured. So, you know, I want to do a motion. So you look at the chapter on motions, or what happens when recommendations? You look at it. You couldn't do that in the previous one.
I'd only just got my head round the last lot, you know, and I was using those quite nicely, I thought. Now they've all changed.
They haven't, but I understand your frustration. Okay, so all those in favour for taking those recommendations minus the 2 to full council, please show. Thank you, unanimous.
Martin, in all councils, some people stand up and say standing order 1, 2, 3, 4, the blue one in the yellow corner, and people say fine, and you go on.
So then
It doesn't exist. Yeah.
then we've got it's a small one, isn't it? Revised financial regulations. Page 48, isn't it? It's the last page. Yeah, 48. You like
yes.
on the previous page, on back.
Yeah, this follows some updated guidance that we received from the National Association of Local Councils that suggests that they've updated the procurement thresholds in legal topic note Ltn87 Procurement, I'm sure you're all massively aware of. But essentially what they've done is they've removed what previously had EU references that are no longer relevant. They've also advised that while the LTN gives a basic overview, says procurement is a niche area for which councils may need to take specialist advice when dealing with procurement matters. And so what's happened in the financial regulations, if you haven't got hard copies, I have got them, but the hard copies of financial regulations have purely been updated to include a statement to the effect that procurement is a niche area and the council may need to take specialist advice when dealing with procurement matters. It's updated to say that contracts which exceed thresholds in the regulations set by the World Trade Organization's government procurement agreement, which is the update from the EU reference, which was there before, and that those thresholds have now been included in the document itself. It also states that very few contracts would exceed thresholds above. Anything that was of high value would require technical or legal advice from those who would specialise in that. But it's really, that's all we've updated, minor bits really to go in line with the new legal topic note from the government.
Any questions on that?
On page 48, item 1, to consider, it's saying adding reference to councils, updating EU references and changing the Emperor procurement limit. What about in respect of generating or selling electricity, that bit? Because I don't think you mentioned that in what to consider. Or do you feel that's covered by one of the things you are updating? LTN89, that's what I'm asking. Do you think you need
I'd
to
have to
refresh
ask,
LTN89?
I'd have to ask Kevin to go back and probably review that. So
Oh, okay.
recommendation we had from the town clerk was to review that upper section of legal topic note 87.
Oh, I see.
So that's where those updates have come in. But obviously, if Kevin felt that we needed to review that bit as well, more than welcome to have a look at that.
Okay. In the meantime, because this financial regulations, I think, potentially is a little bit more serious than our standing orders. Could we go ahead with what this is recommending here and actually refer to the standing financial regulations working party? We've got to keep it a different name, please. Which is happening the day after. Yes, the day after. So that what would happen is then that would result in a recommendation which would come back here and then go to. Is that acceptable to everyone?
Yes, because this doesn't mean anything. It's basically-
We make it the sofa subcommittee. Very relaxing.
So far, so good.
Yes.
You mean coffee and cake?
Yeah.
Just a tongue nudge. Okay, thank you very much. Item 7 is the financial regulations. That's all those in favour. Thank you very much. Youth Services Working Party, 2 reports to note. Since there are no recommendations, I don't see the need to have a debate or anything on that.
I've got some questions.
I'm not sure if any, well, if the officers can answer them. Martin, ask the questions.
I don't understand what a Youth Services Working Party's role is. Could somebody please explain that to me?
Yeah, I mean, it's set out in the terms of reference which were approved.
There's no terms of reference regarding this working party on this website. I did look for it. I needed to understand.
Okay, I'll check that. They do exist and they were approved by this committee.
But they need to be made public, don't they?
Yeah, I'll check that.
Okay, I'd like to see them. Yeah. Could you not explain to me roughly who do they report to?
This committee, and it was set up specifically to look at the terms that would go into the service level agreement.
So this committee is responsible for the decisions or recommendations they make, is that correct?
There's no decisions, but there will be a recommendation that comes back to this committee on the following the tendering process on which.
So can they make recommendations regarding the tendering process?
Yes, I mean, they're guiding the tendering process, so that group is putting together that.
Can I just ask, I know that one of the very first item is that Councillor Gilder was made chairman of this Youth Services Working Group. Now, since I've joined the council, I've been left with a very strong impression that Councillor Gilder is either a very good friend of Sam Milligan's, or he's very much in favour of Sam Milligan, because that's the impression that I've been left with. Now, I'm not sure somebody should act as the chair of a working group that is responsible for recommending tendering when that person is tendering for work from the council. am I making a point here that it's valid or not?
I think it's a very unfair point because there are the individual is not here to dispute or answer that question. It's been made publicly now on YouTube, which I think is, not the right thing to do.
Yeah.
But I'll take Beth.
I've got other points that I need to make about this.
Beth.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I just express my disappointment that we are, I think now, a good 2 years, if not 3 years, into having no proper provision for the youth in Woodley. This is taking an awful long time to achieve, and we have severe mental health problems in the youth area. We've got some disruptive behaviour going on in the park and in other areas of the town. And although there is unofficial youth work not paid for by this authority going on, we're not doing justice to our young people. They've had a rough 2 years, and I know we all have, but some of us are better equipped to deal with turmoil and trouble than they are. They've had disruption to their lives, they've had disruption to their education, and that disruption is still going on because COVID is still going about. Schools are still suffering high levels of sickness among staff, and children are still working remotely in some schools. And that isn't fair. We could ease this situation by getting our act together and getting some proper provision for the youth in place.
I couldn't agree more with you. There was a working group that set up, a tender expression of interest went in. One group had an expression of interest. The working party decided that wasn't enough to go back again. So that, and that sort of thing has been happening over the last 2 years. But either we do this in a process-oriented way. I don't like process, to be very honest, if it's too long. But that's what a lot of us, if you remember, right at the beginning of the this term, and we are where we are.
Yes, I'm going to say Beth has said it much better, but I've already expressed my concern about the time it's taken. Under Report SR 21/22, it says that meetings to be arranged with potential service providers. Could I ask if these have happened? Not happened, but are the dates arranged? Because again, if not, this is just rolling on and taking time.
Yeah, if I can update on the timeline. Informal discussions with potential providers have happened. There's one that hasn't happened yet, which we do via Zoom. The purpose of those is as much for my benefit as anything as well in informing the documentation that we do to make sure we've covered things off, and that was the purpose of doing that. What we have got in terms of the timeline is the next meeting of the working party, which at the moment is scheduled for Monday, the 10th of October. Immediately following that, the tender documentation will go out with the aim of meeting the 22nd of November S&R for the recommendation to come to that meeting so that we get it, all that work done in this period, so that recommendation comes to the next meeting this week.
Okay, thank you.
It says on S&R 21/22, it's this Carol's point. It was agreed that the Deputy Town Clerk would contact Lynn Middleton of the National Youth Agency to arrange this. I don't know what this is, but it might be something prior, and to include Berkshire Youth in the informal discussions with potential providers. Then, under resolved, on the next page, it says the Deputy Town Clerk contact Lee Middleton of the National Youth Agency, invite him to meet with the subcommittee to provide some informal advice and information. So what you've done is, prior to this, you said that you'd include Berkshire Youth. Then, when you've actually said this, what you would do is you only contact this chap called Lee Middleton.
That should include Berkshire Youth, and I have done that.
Right, okay.
And that's the one that's due to happen. David's been on holiday.
Right, thank you. Okay. Now, the other thing that caused me a little bit of concern is that our agenda today said that there's nothing for us to consider other than perhaps no. I'm not sure what the difference is, but there's a whole list of things that in the second meeting report that cover things that I think we should be interested in, which is what's going to be included in the tender document in terms of, what things, how do we measure this objectively? What proportion of youth workers are employed? These are things that I think this group or this committee should be telling other people and advising other people to be included in the document and not just left to the working party. I think this makes this very relevant to us rather than just flying past it and saying noted.
I think there shouldn't be a working party, really.
I think that my honest opinion is that the working party needs to be formed differently. I would have put Richard Skegg as the chair of that group because he's a pretty level-headed chap.
Well, I'm a member of this working party, and I can assure you, Richard is a very active member of the working party and is very well able to ask all his questions, and there's no problem about that.
Mm.
And I would say that we're really motoring now, by the way, in terms of actually seeing all these potential.
And can I say, no, we shouldn't be trying to do the working party's job for them. I know you have an issue with one particular member, which you've vocally said tonight. No, we should encourage them. Anne's already given you a report that they are motoring. We need to get that back here. And I'm sure you as you as a member of this committee is their recommend when they do get recommendations, they should be coming to us at some stage. You as a member of the committee can actually scrutinise that. And if there's something missing, that's the time to try and put them in. Okay.
I will obviously do that. My concern after what Anna just said is that the group is motoring is, when did the group last meet?
We've met. No, we've met. We really want the actual date. Quite recently.
What was that, a secret or something? Because I never got told.
Well, it was a working group meeting. I mean, we were meeting for potential providers, so it's not a public meeting.
Yes,
Oh, right,
the last
but it wasn't
meeting
known to other councillors.
So the last meeting was the 26th of July, last meeting of the working party. So since then we've had been doing the legwork with the documentation and those informal conversations to inform the documentation, which is the bit I think Anne's referring to, which has got us to the point where at the next meeting on the 10th, we can agree what's in the documentation to go out to tender and for that to go out.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
14th of September, that's when we met with the potential providers. To the next couple of weeks. Obviously, it's a question of their availability as well as ours.
So can this committee say who you met with?
It's a public meeting.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, but we've got a YouTube. There should be, I would have thought, a degree of confidentiality.
There is in terms of the organisations that have submitted an interest. So,
Right. So we as councillors aren't able to know who you met with.
Well, we can't have it in. Michael, we can't have it in this meeting because it's being broadcast.
Can we have it in
live.
the confidential section, please?
So,
I don't really know why you need to know that.
Well, yes, I'm a councillor. I just want to know who's being included and who's being considered.
Well, I mean, I don't think I know everything that happens in the council that's confidential.
Well, I assure you, I want to know.
Well,
right, let's cut that here. We can't do it here because it's live streaming. All right, there's a confidentiality. I personally, and Carol, I hope you agree with me, I don't have a major issue of letting councillors know on a highly confidential.
Yes, not at all. I mean, if Martin wants.
Well, I'm sure I will write to the clerks and ask them what's going on, because nobody else has been informed that you were going to have the meetings, but there was no information that said you've had the meetings.
But I stress, it is highly confidential, and we don't want suddenly things to appear in the press.
Well, in fact, one of the potential providers actually mentioned that at the meeting, and specifically that I don't trust the councillors actually.
Well, anyway,
Yeah.
let's move on. So, any more, Martin?
No, I'm done for the moment.
Thank you. Let's move on. Item 8, the climate emergency subcommittee, page 53. Again, there isn't any recommendations. I think we had a good interactive conversation, which was quite a few things highlighted. I don't know, Carol, do you want to say something?
Just to say, are we definitely meeting on the 4th, next Tuesday?
The agenda's due to go out on
There is an
Thursday.
agenda. Fine. I just didn't want it to maybe not happen because there wasn't anything on. I'm sure I could put something on there.
Okay.
That's lovely, thank you.
Yeah, could you just remind me when the, I'm sure that there's a full council or some sort of set of agenda pack somewhere where the latest version of the climate emergency action plan has been sent to us. Can you just remind me which was the latest, please?
The revised one, following the last meeting,
Yeah.
one of the questions there was for us to review the document format, which we've done. So that'll be coming to the meeting on Tuesday. And then that document, once approved, the format of how that works, and then that will start being fed back into this committee at each meeting. So we agreed it would be a standing item.
Oh, right, okay, right, thanks.
But can I assume Tuesday will be face to face, or is it going to be remote?
I think we've held them face to face because they take place immediately prior to.
It's immediately before planning, yes.
Yes.
Going back to some of the earlier comments about changes of standing orders and making these remote.
Yeah, there's always the opportunity to hold a meeting in person if it's easier and more sensible, yes. The next meeting's on the 4th of October.
Yeah.
Should have a redesigned action plan format.
Okay, over the road, over the page to item 9, PR marketing subcommittee. There are some recommendations on this. It's, page 56 is the minutes, report, should I say? And then we've got two things to decide: a draft flag flying policy, page 59, and also a request to allocate some funds to put a third flagpole in, on page 66. The rationale for the third flagpole is we have to fly the green flag, so that takes one out of action.
But I don't understand what a green flag is.
Well, green flag is the award that Woodford Park has had. It's one of the few in the borough. It's the only one. It's a very prestigious award. It says that the park, in essence, it says the park has a lot of facilities, looked after well, etc. It's a bit like a Britain in bloom, but it's for parks. So that has to fill up for time. And then we get situations where, so for instance, we've been flying the Ukrainian flag to show our support, but then, of course, unfortunately, the Queen Elizabeth died, and so we had to take the Ukrainian flag down to do the, I was going to call it the ensign. It's not, is it? It's the standard. Thank you. So by putting the third one in, it means we get a bit more flexibility. So I'll start just on the report. Any questions? I can also the answer there. Otherwise, I'll go straight to the flag flying policy. So all those in favour of the flag flying policy,
Something else.
all those in favour, please show. Okay, thank you. All those against? Okay, yes.
Can I just ask you a question, because it's on the topic of this committee, subcommittee. Is there a policy for keeping the council notice boards up to date across the?
Yeah, you get a hot topic of mine. I've been pestering for a while, haven't I, saying that
Yeah,
they're looking grubby, grotty, people are sticking things on top of them, they need revamping.
yeah, it was discussed at that meeting, and yeah, we're doing a bit of work on it.
Oh, right,
But your point is very valid.
okay, yeah.
Okay, now moving on to item 2, the £3,000 from general reserve to fund the personal conservation and planning requirements of the third floor. Any questions on, or can we go straight to the vote? All those in favour, please show.
Sorry, what are we voting on?
But buying and installing a new flag. All those against? Abstain? Thank you, Martin. Item 10, Town Centre Partnership received the report. 9. Next paperwork, yeah. Right. There's it's just a note. If there's any questions, both. Yeah. You missed that one, didn't you? Myself, while I was there.
It's Amber's.
Yeah, just to ask, I mean, I've noticed that there's some litter, unfortunately, in the community garden. Is there any progress with getting bins? You know?
We haven't done anything with that at the moment.
Oh, right, okay. And then, the defibrillator. Is there a defibrillator on the clock down?
Yes, there is, yeah.
Oh, jolly good. Okay, thank you. That's it then, thank you.
Yes, I'd like to take this opportunity, please, if I may, Chairman, to thank Brian Fennelly, the Town Centre Manager, for helping me get my head shaved. He provided a pitch.
Is that legal?
I don't know. I don't care. He provided a pitch for me. I arranged where I'd like to be, and he facilitated that. It's on the TCMI website, and he did all sorts of small things for me that I'm very grateful for, because without him, I think I would have struggled. And just to say that we've currently made just over £1,000, but anything else is gratefully received.
Can you arrange for that to be presented? It is an amazing asset. Just for information, he's submitted a question for the executive about the car parking charges, which is what you would expect him to do. Yeah. Martin?
I just noticed item 5 on this report, police report. The problem with kids in the shopping centre on motorised vehicles, bicycles, scooters, God knows what else, is getting to a point where there's going to be a very nasty accident. Now, I don't know how we raise this with the local police, but, you know, we need, as a matter of urgency, because somebody is going to get very seriously hurt. There was a little girl flying around at what must have been 20 miles an hour on a scooter. And she could have rammed into a little child, anything. And some old chap went over when I was there, and he had to tell her to stop doing it. Now, fortunately, she did, but it may have been somebody else who could have told him to get knotted. And from my point of view, we're not making enough noise. I don't know who makes the noise.
We did have a meeting, was it two ago, where we had a member of the police force here to talk about e-scooters and electric bikes and things down the precinct, and that they were looking into it and trying to increase the police presence.
And
The suggestion was that e-scooters are actually illegal, both on the road and on the pavement.
But they don't do anything, do they?
But this is the issue. They're the only ones. It's like parking on pavements. They're the only ones that have got the legal authority to do anything. But in terms of making noise, I can tell you the town council, through these guys, are constantly talking police. I and other, I'm sure you guys do as well, constantly talking to the police. But you're right, nothing's happening.
I might, I'm slightly worked up about this, but how much was it for a flagpole? £3,000. We could put some barriers up in that shopping centre that would make it very difficult for people to ride around quickly on scooters and what have you. And I think we should consider doing that. If the police aren't going to do it, we've got to make it difficult for those kids to ride around on these things.
So all that I can tell you exactly what will happen is that they will stop to the barrier, go to the other side of the barrier and get on and do exactly what they're doing now. It won't stop them. Well, unfortunately, the only people who can stop them is police by taking away, because they have the powers to confiscate, and we collectively need to make as much public noise. Martin, go public about it.
I'll go to the press, shall I?
Yeah, about the police. Don't complain about the town council because we can't do anything, but about the police not doing things in that game. Please do. I want to encourage you. The more pressure we can put on the police, the more possibility that they might do something.
Yeah, 2 points, Chairman, if I may. We need to remember that the police have been underfunded for 10, 12 years, that the service personnel were cut by 20,000, and the government are now celebrating the fact that they've got 12,000 of those 20,000 back. In my maths, that doesn't work. The other thing we need to consider is people that use mobility scooters. I use my mobility scooter in the precinct. Mobility scooters have no brakes. I'm not sure the public are aware of that. The police certainly aren't.
You wouldn't be able to get around barriers.
That is true. I wouldn't be able to get round barriers or through narrow spaces on it, but there are a lot of people in the centre who have a much larger mobility scooters than I do. And they can be loaded up with shopping. And so while we've got the young people, and I agree that it can be dangerous, there have been lots of nasty accidents around, but included in that are people falling on the broken slabs that are in the precinct. My head teacher from school fell very bad and banged her head outside the slab in Waitrose. So that leaves the Borough Council potentially up for a problem claim. There are lots of problems, but we need money to solve them. Where's the money going to come from? Because no one these days has got any money.
Again, I'll urge all of you, if you know of a slab that's done that, and I hope you reported it.
It was already known about, and it hadn't been mentioned.
Then please report. You might have to report it several times to get it done, but I know I've had slabs repaired. But it's the classic, if they don't know about it,
absolutely,
they can't. And so many people go, if they have an issue like that, they just go straight onto social media and never go anywhere near the council. And as councillors, and you're a borough councillor and you're the deputy mayor as well, so you're in a very senior position. We all need to constantly report any instances of that. So, right, can I move on, please, if that's okay? Project schedule, page 72. Kevin.
So it's an item to note, but just it's probably worth just mentioning the format has changed on the schedule to how it was before, to include all projects that were previously agreed for funding through the capital programme and through the Building and Facilities Fund, and to try and provide a bit more information on each one as to where they are. This will come back to each meeting of this committee to review. Obviously, as projects come online with approved funding, they'll go on and come off when complete, or after they've been noted as complete. This committee.
Any questions or comments on the paper? Not. To note, item 12, signage, page 76.
Thank you. Officers have carried out an audit, really, of signage across our facilities, our buildings, open spaces, and other areas to establish where we need new signage, replacement signage, and there's quite a bit of it across, as you might imagine, across the buildings and the open spaces. What you've got on page 77. Just that list there of signage locations. That's just a very rough list of areas, and there's a number of signs within those locations. So it's pretty much everything we've got, which needs reviewing. Some of that is because it's just deteriorated over time. Some of it's in bad shape. Some of it's no longer correct, and other bits aren't terribly helpful. So what we've tried to do is obviously address where things are required under legislation or under guidelines from ROSPA and things like that in respective play areas, but also to do something a bit more helpful with things to advise people and show people where the toilets are, where the defibrillators are, and those sorts of things, to include that within the signage. So long and short of that, the quote we've got there's a couple of ins and outs, and that's kind of the higher end, but we were looking at proposed budget £9,000 for that. Installations would be carried out in-house, so that's the production of the signage. The proposal is that be allocated from the capital programme, which currently has a balance of 17,246, and that's where that would have come. That recommendation would have come from last time. It's just we haven't done the audit at that point and considered the project previously.
Yeah, first of all, the typo looks like we've got an interference in Norwich here. There's no signage, but couldn't resist. Sorry. On that, two things. I wonder if on those signs, I would assume that the people using the signs are people that don't know Woodley very well. And it would be helpful to have walking and cycling times on those. If you look at the number of certainly cycling signs that you see around, it tells you how many minutes to, not always how many miles, but certainly minutes for walking and cycling. And I think certainly from what Cycling Woodley Working Group, I think would support the fact that we're doing something like that on the signs. We're making new ones anyway. And secondly, I've had some good reports about children enjoying following the birds and hedgehogs and things along the paths to get to places. And it would be good if we had more children-oriented signs as well. Maybe ones lower down the pole so they can point them out, or as I say, hedgehog squirrels or whatever it takes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Do we consider notice boards part of signage?
It's not included in that.
No, I can see that.
Yeah.
But I wondered if it was an opportunity to include it. I don't know what the cost would be though.
I think perhaps the way forward is for me to establish what that cost is and bring that back.
Thank you. Do we have the right to put up signs in Woodley Precinct, in the shopping centre, which make it clear to people that they shouldn't be cycling and riding motorised vehicles around with somewhat threatening language? I mean, are we allowed to do that?
The precinct is owned by the Borough Council, but the Town Centre Management Partnership regularly put signs up, and they have signs up. So it would be, I would suggest it would be a recommendation to that body, because they're already doing signs, etc., to put up. So if you could potentially, Brian Fennelly is, you know Brian, don't you? Okay. Well, Brian's a Town Centre manager. He lives in here. I'm sure you guys can give Martin his email address just to explain the sorts of things, you know, ideally if you could do a little drawing or whatever, for him then to take that to the partnership committee and to review it.
Okay, I'll raise it.
Yes, I just wondered if you considered signs for Sanford Park and Vauxhall Park.
But they're not ours, so no.
Oh, so they belong to local
Welcome
authority?
back.
Oh,
Put the request in there to them.
because they're the ones who nicked one of the seats, aren't they?
Yeah.
So, that's all I think.
Right.
Just,
Philip.
just putting my environmental hat on. You picked up the environmental issues where you talk about carbon impact. So you've looked at the environmental issues of putting the new stuff up, but you haven't considered the environmental issues of what you do with the old stuff.
Good point.
Say the claim, there's another one following on as well, I think, and probably the same issue on that.
Yeah, and that's actually part of a larger issue, which is in the climate action plan, actually, to do with our refuse waste and how we do get rid of things. What we do have is a certain amount of recycling, which is it's a bit of a general thing through the skips hire that we have through those companies. But on a more specific level, yeah, we can do a bit more on that.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, so that's that down in Woodley Bowling Club. Sorry.
We need to vote on the
Okay.
recommendation.
Oh, yes, all those in favour of the signage, please shout. Unanimous. Let's consider. Well, Woodley Bowling Club, page 80.
Yes, if I can summarise that, there's a bit of information here. We had a really bad year in terms of the condition on the Bowls Green, largely due to the fact that it's been so dry for so long this year, and obviously then with extreme heat, that the green suffered a lot, and it's the toughest year we've had as far as anyone can remember, and some of our guys have been doing it for over 30 years. That was slightly compounded by the irrigation system. So the pre-installed irrigation system not working, and we haven't been able to replace that until the electrical work was done for the leisure centre. So that has delayed that happening, which is the second part of the recommendation here. We did meet with representatives of the Bowls Club who wanted to talk to us about what the impact of that had been on bookings and fixtures that they hadn't been able to have, and they'd had some complaints from visiting teams about that, and basically hadn't been able to play some of the fixtures they would normally have done, and as a result had lost income on that basis. They made a request in terms of whether that could be considered as essentially a discount of £1,200 on the license fee that they pay, which the normal amount being £7,995 for the license. So that is one of the recommendations here, the first one. The second one is to do with the irrigation system, which I mentioned earlier on. We've priced up for a site-specific irrigation system, which is a 9 sprinkler head system, which will cover the whole of the green. It's automated so that it can go on early hours of the morning, when it's most appropriate. It's got sensors on, so it doesn't go on when it rains and things like that. And the option we are looking at within that budget is also to include a larger tank, which we can harvest rainwater to fill as well. So we're actually using rainwater on there rather than mains water. So that's the second recommendation there, and subject to that being approved, we look to do that work fairly soon, and obviously well in time before we go to the next bowls season.
So how old is this existing sprinkler system?
It's very old. I believe it's been there as long as some of our guys have. So I think it's.
So we've made our money out of it, crudely speaking.
Yeah.
Martin?
How many people belong to this Bowls Club, and how many of them are residents?
Don't have that information to hand, but I can.
I think it's very relevant
They
because
have
we have
given us
spent a
that.
lot of money there.
They have given us that, so I can circulate.
Yeah, if you could let us know, I'd be interested in knowing. I don't want to vote on this until I get that sort of information. Because that money's for the benefit of Woodley residents. And if there's plenty of old people enjoying it, I'm more than happy to support it, but I have no idea.
I might have that information here because I know they put in a community grant application at the in April, and that's part of their form. So let me just bring that up quickly. There are 84 members in the organisation. How many people regularly benefit from receiving the service? We're at 70 to 90 people regularly. Average attendance at sessions is 30 to 40, and the percentage of members or service users at Woodley residents is 85%. They say how many members use the service are Woodley, so 74. So they say 74 of their 84 members they reckon are Woodley residents.
Yes, I mean, I've known the Bowling Club for many, many years, and I know certainly have a high percentage of Woodley people. I wonder how many of those might be going to other clubs, because they've been very disappointed with the use of the green this year. And I don't think we're providing what we're asking them to pay for. So I would support reduction in the rental.
Yeah, actually, I was going to say, on page 83, item 2, equality impact, can you say that for age, bowling is good for older people? It's a positive benefit for older people.
It is. I think the issue there is we're not really changing anything in terms of the.
Yeah, but it's yes, it's maintaining it.
It's a continuation of what's already there. Yeah, but yeah.
Notice at the top of page 81 that the bowling club made a contribution to our finances in 2020. Was that over and above what they would normally have paid for their annual licence?
No, it was on the basis that they were shut and had zero income.
So that was in lieu of.
Yeah.
Used to be the best bowling green in the county.
Got a couple of questions.
Yeah.
Do we still have the public rink there?
Yes.
And are we still managing it?
Yes.
Do you not think it would be more appropriate that they did the management? Could you go away and think about that one?
Possibly. I think some of that might depend on who's available at any given time at the club. Whereas because we operated from the leisure centre, some just pictures up there.
Okay,
Go into the leisure centre.
and then the second, okay, fine, forget that one then. The second question then, conversations I've had with the chair and the treasurer, etc. They raised the concept of limited amount of advertising. Did that come up in your conversation?
Not specifically, but what they have been talking to us about it. We've guided them back to the licence agreement, which does permit them to do a number of things, but to ask us specifically what it is that they want to do. So, and so they know that.
Okay, because the last thing we want, I think, is to lose a semi-thriving bowling club. And it's not just old people. You know, if you go to the annual council versus club, there are youngsters in there, certainly young compared to me.
Very young compared to me.
Okay, so can we go on can I take the two recommendations as one, please? No objections. All those in favour? Two recommendations, please show. All those against? Abstain? Martin? Community grants. So we're going to try and speed up a bit because we're running out of time. Community grants and the letter of thanks received from the Festival of Music and Arts. An amazing organisation. You ever get a chance to go and see the children perform or what have you, you will hopefully, Beth, as a deputy mayor, go on. It's amazing.
I went as mayor when I was mayor for the town. Yeah.
Community infrastructure levy, page 86. Again, that's a note. I noticed it says council's yet to submit an updated return. Have we?
Yeah, we have. We just haven't got the updated figure. So when we get that back, I'll circulate that.
Thank you. Future agenda items, any future agenda items? No. Any publicity and website? Carol?
Yes, just to report something there's very rarely a Woodley cycling working party, so I wonder if I could use this space to say that there was a kidical mass. It's a meeting and it started at Coronation Hall. The idea is to get children on their bikes and adults on their bikes, and it's a play on words for critical mass. So we had 20 Woodley children joining us and adults at Woodley. We then cycled from Woodley down to Palmer Park, and another 70 joined us. And we managed to stop the traffic on the A4, which was a very powerful feeling. They had to wait for us all to cross. And we had one little youngster on a balance bike, so it took a while. And we ended up at the Reading Cycle Fest. So, yeah, it was good. And it started in Woodley.
So that's one that was in the social media, wasn't it? It's on Facebook. It looked really fun.
It was.
But I was too old, I was like it.
I was one of the marshals, so no, it doesn't matter your age. You don't cycle.
Okay, since we're nearly reaching 10 o'clock, and we do have an important confidential item to deal with, so I have to use the following words: as the business of the meeting has not been completed by I'd like to be completed by 10 p.m. and according with Standing Order 11.5, I propose that the meeting continues until no later than 10:30 p.m. The reason being that we have a confidential item that we need to decide. Can I have a seconder?
Second that.
Thank you. All those in favour, please. That's unanimous. Okay. Thank you. 19 Borough Parish Liaison Form, page 87. And Martin?
Yeah, just a couple of quick questions. I've never heard of this before. Is this something to do with us as a town council? Do we appoint the people that attend? Okay, and is it this committee that appoints? Who appoints the people?
Annual meeting when we decide on the outside body. Sorry, Sue.
Okay, I've never seen or heard of it before. Okay, well, I know that now. I'll bear it in mind. Who's Al Neil?
Who's?
Al Neil.
He's a councillor, borough councillor.
And he's also an early town councillor.
Yeah, but he's down as,
Is he one of your lot or?
no,
which
he's
lot?
down as a Woodley Town Council. There's a mistake here.
It's one of our-
I've never heard of him. He's down as a Woodley Town
He is
Council.
a Woodley town, yes, no, he's an early town
Oh, I
councillor.
see, yes. Well, he's twice, because he's
Okay.
called Al, but he's actually
Alison.
Alan,
Okay, he's an early.
Beth, can I ask you to feed that back and get it amended?
yes, will do. Can I say something about it as well? It was a really good meeting, and out of it came some suggestions between the towns and things working together. And in fact, Carol suggested that we set up a group to look at something, and it's since morphed into something that's going to look at poverty. And we've been invited today to join the group that's working with poverty on the Borough Council, so that we're not doing the same things. And I think the idea of town councillors being involved is that they need to know, because if they come in touch with a resident, they need which way to signpost them and what's available. So we haven't had a meeting. In fact, we only had that today. We haven't replied. But that will be going forward and we'll report back.
So is that like a subcommittee?
It's a tasking group.
Will you two attend?
Oh, there's two Al Neils. There's an Alistair Neil and an Al Neil.
It's the same person.
So I guess it is. Yeah.
Okay. I'll have another sheet. Thank you.
Good night.
Right.
I need to say, even though he's gone, to resolve that in view of the confidential nature of the business about to be transacted in relation to procurement matters, it is advisable in the public interest for the public and press are temporarily excluded, and they are asked to withdraw for item 21 on the agenda. Do you stop the
I need to vote on that.
Okay. All those in favour?
Yes, come on.
Okay.